This tutorial provides an overview of the major ideologies that matter in politics today. And by major, I mean those ideologies that have the longest history in modern politics and or are the most influential on political mobilization. So liberal, green, and socialist parties have all had considerable electoral success in most democracies today. Now, it's important here that I'm speaking from a political science point of view. I'm not using the labels of the American politics. So when I say words like conservatives and liberals, I'm not speaking about the right and the left necessarily. I'm talking about the classic ideologies and the labels that goes with those in political thought. So, let's start. And we'll start with conservatism and liberalism. And the key values to conservatism, really, are tradition, human imperfection, organic society, authority, and property. Thomas Hobbes and Edmund Burke are really some of the classic philosophers here. In Leviathan, Hobbes defended absolutist government as the only alternative to anarchy and chaos, and argued that citizens have an obligation towards the state. Burke was writing a commentary on the French Revolution, and he argued that such upheavals would endanger social stability, and that wisdom resides in experience, tradition, and history. So we have learned from our forefathers, so we should act politically, recognizing that wisdom. Contemporary conservatism often operates on the basis that protection of interests should be defined by leadership and that there should be an order within the state. So it's often associated in these days with traditional family values or traditional Christian values. So there's been sort of a religiosity being associated with conservatism, if you will. And they're often closely allied with liberals in questions of economy and nationalists in questions of national security. Turning to liberalism, which was kind of a reaction to conservatism in many ways, it's not a collectivist ideology like conservatism. It is an individualist one. So the key values here are the individual, freedom, reason, justice, and toleration. And some of these thinkers are really key here. So John Locke, Adam Smith, John Stuart Mill. We're talking about equality of rights. We're talking about the consent of citizens. So the citizens have to consent to what the state is doing. Self-determination, the ability to act in free choice without external compulsion. And the emphasis from Locke is really on negative liberty. In other words, the state is not allowed to act on me. I have freedom. That means that there should be constraints on what the government is allowed to do. Jean-Jacques Rousseau emphasized more the importance of positive liberty, so the state enabling me to do things. Adam Smith, of course, who presented his work on the free market, the invisible hand, that basically arguing that economic forces left on their own would lead to more efficiency and growth over time and benefit everyone. So the state should be fairly passive. Because a state that gets involved in economics will make things worse. That's basically what he argued. And John Stuart Mill's text on liberty defended freedom of speech, arguing that some people might say offensive things or be considered strange and weird, but that doesn't mean that they should be censored. They should not be convicted in a court of law for saying things that people find immoral, for instance. All of these are very much emphasizing the individual and freedom. 19th century philosophies were nationalism and socialism, really. Nationalism focuses on the nation as an organic community that needs to have self-determination. And in that sense, it's a form of identity politics. We can talk about two philosophers here that have been really important. Johann Gottfried von Herder, who described how each nation has a kind of Volksgeist, if you will, a national spirit. Which provides the people with creative impulse. That's almost turning the people into something metaphysical. The sum becomes more important than the parts, and takes on an entity of its own. Giuseppe Mazzini, an Italian philosopher who was a very important thinker ahead of the Italian unification, talked about how the nation consists of sublimated individuals endowed with the right to self-determination. It's a very collectivist ideology. It emphasizes group membership and the group over the individual, and has been strongly influential for ideas about self-determination and sovereignty. So the nation-state is the only viable political unit for a nationalist. Socialism arose during the same era. It emphasized community, cooperation, equality, needs, and common ownership. Karl Marx, of course, key figure in this development, and talked about how society has been corrupted by class divisions, by the bourgeoisie class that owns property, how it exploits the working class, and how these two classes will always be in conflict with each other. It's very collectivist, but where nationalists talks about the nation as the collective, socialists will talk about class, economic class, as the collective. And it emphasizes economic conditions and how history has been created by the opposition between different economic classes. Edward Bernstein is noteworthy here because he broke with the revolutionary socialists after the Russian Revolution and argued for a socialism that would be more peaceful and reformist. So work within the existing system for social and economic justice. That was basically his argument. And in doing so, he became a key figure in the creation of social democracy in Europe and North America, a type of socialism that was more interested in reforms through the ballot than revolution through the bullet. For the 20th century, perhaps the most significant major ideology would have been environmentalism in terms of its capacity to mobilize voters and create new political parties and so on. The key values here are ecology, holistic view of society, sustainability, environmental ethics, and post-materialism. And important names include Rachel Carson and James Lovelock. Her book on Silent Spring talked about the consequences of pollution, and Lovelock discussed Earth as a complex sort of self-regulating living being. So there's the focus on ecology. And in the 1980s, of course, these ideas gave rise to new political parties, particularly in Europe, and new political ideas opposing the liberal ideas about a laissez-faire economy, and argued that industrialism must be checked because it causes too much pollution, it restricts human freedom. So there's been a lot of non-government organizations coming out of that, but also a lot of political parties. And today, of course, we have issues like sustainable development, climate change, that really drives the conversation based on an environmentalist perspective. Should there be a carbon tax? How do we prevent damage from further climate change, and so on and so forth. So the point here is to see if society can achieve a balance where humanity can be prosperous without damaging nature. And those are the major ideologies of contemporary politics.